But so you've hit on something that, has been driving both Mark and I crazy, and maybe you can help us with it in Silicon Valley. So in Silicon Valley, with the advance of AI, there's all these kind of people who I don't want to, who are worried about what AI might automate, and then their answer is this idea of universal basic income, where it's like, oh, like we'll make it so only us smarties have to work, and then you regular people will just make it so you don't have to work. And both he and I are like, wow, that's a bad idea. You're going to take away everybody's purpose. And by the way, AI hasn't so far taken away any jobs, it doesn't look like. So we'll see how that goes, or the net on a net basis. But kind of countering that argument is tricky in the sense that I'll point out things. I'm like, we have UBI for Native Americans. It's called the reservation system, and it's horrible. And it's $65,000 a year a piece, and it does not do anything. It's the worst thing we probably ever did. And so, but people go, well, like, what are you going to do? And how do you think about like what are we going to do in these job transitions as they happen? Because even if we're net plus jobs, we'll probably transition out of some old jobs, as we always have with automation, and get to the new ones. And how do you think about that, and making sure people have purpose when they lose their job and have to get retrained?
I think it's one of the biggest issues that no one's paying attention to. I asked President Obama about this years ago, and he's like, oh, it's not going to change that fast. And I said, hey, look at what just happened, in the the world financial crisis. The number of jobs of people just driving Ubers, taxis, and trucks. Let's just assume at some point in the near future, you're going to have the opportunity to not have a truck driver who needs healthcare and who will complain and can only drive 8 hours a day max and takes lots of insurance. And now you got a truck that you can depreciate and can drive 24 hours a day without having an accident. The insurance is lower. I said, that's 8 million jobs. That's the entire number of jobs that were just lost during that time that make the economy look like it's going through the floor. That's one category. And I said, you're telling me there's no, he goes, well, we've all discussed it with a bunch of experts and no one thinks the change can happen that fast. Maybe he's right. Maybe there won't be, but there's going to be disruption. There's no question for certain jobs. And we're not preparing these people at all. And what happens is just giving somebody money is never enough, because they need that meaning. And once they get the money, they'll want more of that money. I'm not suggesting, taxing, let's say, some of these technologies separately and providing some core resources for those in need makes sense, or somebody's displaced, that money goes for education for something new. I think that's interesting. But paying people to do nothing, I know there's some studies where they'll say, look how well this worked, but they're pretty rare and they're not long-term. And so I'm very skeptical personally. I think there's 6 needs all human beings have in my experience, and that's how I manage and work with people. It's like I see which of those needs are kind of their top 2 driving force. So we all need certainty, comfort, we can avoid pain, have pleasure. But if you're totally certain every moment, you'd be bored out of your mind. So we need uncertainty. We need variety to feel alive. Too much variety, people freak out. Too much certainty, they're bored out of their mind. And there isn't like a lukewarm middle. It's more your ability to meet both needs simultaneously. There's the need for significance, to feel unique, to feel special, to feel important. You can do that by taking risks and trying to build something. But then if you fail, you look like you're worthless and unloved. And so most people have found tearing somebody else down is a much faster way to feel like I'm moving up. It's an illusion. It doesn't last, but it's become a driving force in social media, for example. You can have significance by how you dress. You can have significance by having certain pronouns. You can have significance by knowing sports scores, many people. You have significance by making more money. There's so many ways to get significance. The only question is, do the ways you do it empower you or disempower you and the people around you? Fourth, we need connection and love. Everyone needs it. Some people settle for connection because love's too scary. And then the spiritual needs are number 5, we got to grow. We grow or we die. Number 6, we got to contribute. So if I don't work, I need something else that's going to call me past my certainty, get me to step into the world of uncertainty, which is where all aliveness comes from. Aliveness comes from uncertainty, not knowing. That's where growth gets stimulated, by trying something you haven't done before. We need to find better ways to feel significant by doing something useful for others, as opposed to demanding significance by you calling me King Tony, because that's my new pronoun, or whatever it is that you want to use for it, right? Sire, call me sire. That's my pronoun from now on, right? So it's like lots of ways. The question you got to ask yourself is, do they serve or not? And I think our society has become very driven by certainty and by significance, but it's significance at any cost. And so I can change the colors, the pictures, and the way I look. I can tear somebody else down, look good. I can put up a flag of another country and I don't know anything about it, but suddenly I can virtue signal and I'm a good person. And so all that I think is starting to wear out, I hope, because we're all dying for something deeper. Or, reality TV is bullshit. So it's like, is there anything real left in our society? And I think when there's something real, people tend to move towards it. That's been one of the great things that's helped me in terms of reaching mass number of people, because you can't fake it when you're doing something 12 hours a day, 4 straight days and nights, giving you every ounce of your soul. People start to go, hey, this is the real thing. And then they step up because you go first.
And maybe, Marc, like, how do you think about this whole, people don't need to work, perhaps we should hand them money, or, this purpose in life. And, if not work, then what?
So the Romans had a fundamental conception of politics, and it had to do with the relationship between patron and client. And so the definition of success in Roman politics was, as a politician, you wanted to be a patron to as many clients as possible. And of course, it's a dependency relationship, right? The clients are dependent on the patron. And so they're basically that. I think that's the pattern that keeps reestablishing itself. Which is, again, if you're a politician, what do you really want? You want a dependent voter base, and you want a voter base that's dependent on largesse and things that you can do for them, and then ultimately that resolves to to handouts. And so there's a very natural inclination in the political system to basically, let's say, farm the citizenry, and I mean farm in the sense of farm animals. It's a very natural motivation on the part of politicians. And so it's a and look, it's one of these things where, if people have the negative psychology we've been talking about, the idea of basically getting free handouts sounds pretty good. When people have, real self-respect and real pride, they find that to be very offensive, which is very dangerous from a political standpoint, because then they're not going to just always vote for the person who's giving them the handout. And so as with all these things, it comes back to one's own view of oneself, and whether one is proud of what one is doing with your life.